This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Okay, I think my favourite amp in the world is the Deluxe Reverb from Fender. This is just a reissue. I got it for about 850 quid, I think. And when you plug a guitar into it, you know, you plug it in. One is barely nothing. Just there about 2. It's pretty quiet. It's getting a bit louder. If I get it up to 2.5. We're now very loud. We're at 3. Three and a half, well, just over 3. Getting up towards 4. And now it's painful and frankly not that pleasant any longer. So that's my favourite amp in the world, and at home like that it's actually not really that pleasant. Without pedals, as a pedal platform it's great, specifically I think for this reason that, you know, up till 3, 4, 5 on the dial where it's getting really loud, it's still staying pretty clean, right? I plugged into Anthony. Now he is selling this Cornell Romany. It's a 10 watt amp, 10 watt Tweed amp. I had it here for a while, and I just plugged it in because I thought I better get this thing back to him. And you hear it in the room, and it's kind of like, okay, well that's a sound. And then you hear it back recorded, and you're like, well that is a really good recorded amp sound, and all of it at volumes that never really got painful in the room or anything. And it just made me think, have we been maybe buying the wrong amps, or me specifically, maybe you feel similar, that are just really not tailored to the situation that you're in? yes, I really like the sound and feel of like a big blooming clean and all these things. At the end of the day, do they record as well as a small 10-watt Tweed amp? Possibly not even. And it's kind of interesting to me, because it's like, well, the Tweed amp kind of was superseded by these other amps that, as time went on, you know, PA systems started to get involved and things needed to get louder and louder to keep up, you know, to the point where you had things like a Fender Twin. And actually now things are ramping back down again, where it's like amps live being encouraged to take smaller and smaller bits of gear, and to the point where, you know, some people at home are like, do I even need an amplifier? And a Tweed amp, again, I think is now coming into this sort of sweet spot. What made me think of trying this was hearing that Larry Carlton, a few months ago, I was listening to, someone recommended listening to a Donald Fagen tune, and I listened to it and I was like, that's the Dumble sound. And I was like, well, what was he actually using back here? It's actually a Tweed amp. And if you look at what old Alexander Dumble had said about some of these things, is one of the things that he was trying to get with his Dumble amps was like that's deluxe Tweed sort of feel, or the Tweed sort of vibe, but actually brought to a higher volume. And I guess that is quite interesting to hear, because obviously when we hear stuff on recordings like in a studio, we don't have any idea about volume, and that's kind of the cool thing about sticking a mic in front of something, is that you can then reduce the need for it to be deafening for you guys at home or whatever. But that's apparently one of the things that it was going for was kind of like that Tweed thing, but a more robust and sort of that could scale up. And it does remind me, there's something about the Dumble thing as well, which has this kind of barky, unforgiving vibe to it, which I would say a Tweed amp, it's got that kind of like strong mid voice, which is not necessarily super satisfying whilst you're in the midst of playing it, but when I listen back to it, it's like, that's actually quite a cool recorded tone. Just sticking a SM57 in front of it, I'd love to know some of your guys' opinions on that as well, if you're someone who's not tried a Tweed amp, or someone who has tried Tweed amps and found that you've enjoyed them. Now, Anthony himself is selling the Cornell, he bought it, but he prefers actually a Tone Master Deluxe reverb that he's got in terms of playing at home. But I think actually the Cornell has a great reverb. It sounds really good and is manageable at home. It's got this attenuator on it where you can turn it down to like below 1 watt, and that works quite well for getting some pretty chuggy tones out of it. Considering the other sort of trade-offs that you get with this as well is that I don't think Tweed amps, similarly to what Howard Alexander Dumble would say, was that those amps don't necessarily take pedals super well, and he said it about his own amps as well. And so experimenting with different pedals than you might normally use, and an interesting point here, if you think of Larry Carlton, do you necessarily think of an MXR Distortion 78 as like his sound? Real eye-opener for me. So something I'm considering, you know, in a month where I've not had any gigs, like these amps that I've got have not really been turned on much at all. This at 2, I was recording a pedal demo this morning, but would a Tweed amp get used a little bit more? This is what I've said about when I tried my buddy Jake's Lazy J that he had at the time. It's more like the whole of the amp is kind of a sweet spot, versus this, which is like the sweet spot doesn't really exist in the same sort of way. It's like it's either clean or it's going to be loud, and this is only 22 watts. And I don't know if a Princeton is somewhat similar or not, because it's quite a similar circuit. But I'd love to know some of your guys' thoughts on this, and whether Tweed is the answer. What was the question? What is it good for? I'll catch you in another video soon. Cheers. If you're interested in that Cornell amp, as some of you guys, I think Chris, you bought the Road Worn off of Anthony, and Tim, hopefully you're going to check out his custom shop at the weekend. But yeah, he's an awesome guy, lives down in Axminster. you could send an into his son at keytomycage on Instagram. I'm just trying to help these guys out because I know some of you guys are looking for some really nice gear. So, you know, if you're looking for it, then shoot keytomycage a message. Cheers for stopping by.